In this system, bankruptcy isn't some irregular byproduct that negligent people just happen to stumble into. It is an inevitable built-in attribute. It's a game of musical chairs. I hope that's clear. In the words of economist Bernard Lietaer, a great quote, "Greed and competition are not the result of a mutable human temperament. Greed and fear of scarcity are, in fact, being continuously created and amplified as a direct result of the kind of money we are using. We can produce more than enough food to feed everybody, but there is clearly not enough money to pay for it all. The scarcity is in our national currencies. In fact, the job of the central banks is to create and maintain that scarcity. The direct consequence is that we have to fight with each other in order to survive." That last sentence really defines so much. The direct consequence is that we have to fight with each other in order to survive. The consequence of these mechanisms is, again, extreme social imbalance and hence social stratification. With this understood, let's now consider the state of income inequality within the world. In 2005, the jolly folks at Citigroup put out a memo to its wealthiest clients in regard to the state of what they called the plutonomy. In the opening summary on this is very, very clear. The world is divided into two blocks, the plutonomy and the rest. The US, the UK, and Canada are the key plutonomies, economies powered by the wealthy. The plutonomy is defined as a society where the majority of the wealth is, of course, controlled by an ever-shrinking minority. And as such, the economic growth of that society becomes dependent on the fortunes of the wealthy minority and not the rest of the people. Keep that in mind. They then go to ask the question, what are the drivers of plutonomy? They state disruptive technology, driven productivity gains, creative financial innovation, capitalist-friendly cooperative governments, an international dimension of immigrants and overseas conquests invigorating wealth creation, slave labor, the rule of law, and patenting inventions. Often these wealth waves involve great complexity, exploited best by the rich and educated of the time. The basic point of this document is the understanding that the average consumer is essentially meaningless to the equity markets. For the super wealthy, trading amongst themselves account for the state of the economy overall. They state, in a plutonomy, there is no such animal as the US consumer or the UK consumer or indeed the Russian consumer. There are rich consumers, few in number, but disproportionate in the gigantic slice of income and consumption they take. There are the rest, the non-rich, the multitudinous many, but only accounting for surprisingly small bites of the national pie. They continue. This is why, for example, we worry less about the impact of high oil prices on aggregate consumption. Clearly, high oil prices are a burden for most parts of our communities. However, without making any moral judgment, income inequality being what it is just makes this group less relevant to the aggregate data. The conclusion, we should worry less about the average consumer, say the 50th percentile, what they're doing, when that consumer is, we think, less relevant to the aggregate data than how the wealthy feel and what they are doing. This is simply a case of mathematics, not morality. You got to hand it to him for being honest. Now, before I go any further, let me clarify a bit. Plutonomy, as the Citigroup documents describe, and these are very long-winded documents, is, of course, the state of extreme imbalance, so extreme in certain countries that the investment community has little regard for the average person's consumption habits. In other words, the preference mutation has occurred as a result of the financial incentive system, where the consumption patterns of the general population become nearly obsolete in the interests of the wealthy, where they, the wealthy elite, the plutonomy, can now just trade amongst themselves and forget about the lower classes. In other words, so much money is being moved around between the rich that the public consumption patterns are nearly irrelevant.